All right, I want to talk about the matchmaking system, ranked, inflation, all of that all at once here, because I know that there's a lot of theories going around on the internet, on Marvel Rival Space, and from the vibe I'm getting is from a lot of people that they're generally demotivated about like what they see, and I think what I'm seeing is mostly just a misunderstanding of how their rank system works, and then a lot of tinfoil hat conspiracy theories that sort of distract you from the whole reason you should be playing in the first place. Um, so this is the rank distribution uh, as of like, I don't know, it was before a few days ago, right? Recently, it's changed, and what got Reddit up in a tizzy was seeing this one. Now, I understand that this one doesn't look quite as good, but also here it's only registering 500,000 players, whereas before it was registering 3.8 million players. I don't really take that new one as seriously. I take it with a massive uh, grain of salt because of the fact that there's just not enough of a sample size. I don't believe that 3.8 million players suddenly just, or sorry, 3.3 million players just suddenly stop playing. I think that is a bit odd, right? So I prefer to just use this one, just because the larger sample size, and it makes a lot more sense. But still, even what you're going to notice, the difference between, let's say, this one and uh, other games' rank distribution is rank distribution generally works like this, right? It you have your gold and silver generally at the most, and then you have your bronze and iron, and everybody else is at the lower end, right? Um, you have this is for Apex. They do things a little bit differently. But still, generally speaking, like, you can see that there's different trends depending on the game that you're playing, right? Uh, Overwatch, massive article. Overwatch rank distribution uh, works similarly, just like that as well, right? But the thing is like with these games, and I can comment specifically, especially on like Overwatch, is that uh, Overwatch, you had placement matches, and those placement matches would help figure out where you're supposed to be, right? So in those placement matches, um, you would avoid getting a lot of the players, which would normally be up here, uh, and you all the placement matches would start, and you would start at a higher rank than what you were supposed to be, or than what people start at in Marvel Rivals, right? In Marvel Rivals, everyone starts at the bottom. So because everyone starts at the bottom, it's a race to the top, right? So at the start of the season, um, I think I think everything in this area is empty. Can't be for sure. I don't know exactly where, like the highest rank you could possibly get. Like if you're one of a ball and you get shot back, like where you go. But essentially, all of the people in these areas then get shoved back uh, into platinum, right? So then you have all of these really good players uh, back down here, and then you have your everyone else gets shoved back as well too. But everyone is basically shoved to a much closer range, right? So what it's trying to do is like you have like your anti-smurf techniques, which is basically saying because of the fact that everyone starts at the bottom, they're like, hey, we're gonna start, and if you get your first win, we're just gonna assume that you shouldn't be there, and we'll give you 75. And if you get a second win, we'll just give you another like 60, 70, whatever. Like you can tell from the people who know that they're not supposed to be at that rank on any sort of alt account or any time they've ever been on, like you get a massive, huge bonus at the start for every win that you get. And it's trying to rush you through as soon as possible because you don't belong there, right? So win streaks seem to have some sort of an effect on how many points you're given, but it'll also affect, I believe, how many points the enemy team loses, because then you're expected to win versus expected to lose. Uh, so yeah, you have all of these people sort of like duking it out, right? Like this is the reason why at the very start of the season, platinum games at times felt more difficult than some of the grandmaster games I've played today, and that's because of the fact that the players that were here were now in this range are now pushed all the way back down here with the rest of us. So everybody is duking it out and racing because these areas can't stay empty forever. There has to be something done in order to fill those areas back up. So what they do, and what I am theorizing here, is that, at the start of the season, perhaps theoretically, let's say you do get more points for wins versus losses. It's trying to refill the ranks back up. It's trying to get people into the distribution that it should be at, because right now this is like what it was, like right before maybe like the midseason patch. And you got to remember, like the graph, at the start of the season at the rank reset would probably look more like this, right? I don't really count bronze 3. This is clearly just shouldn't even be talked about. But it would look more like this. So the graph over time is gradually going to level itself out. But the only way for it to know how to do that is through more matches, right? If you've been playing and you've been playing nonstop, then it's easier to figure out where you should be. And the truth is, the players who are really good are going to get to these ranks the fastest. The players, and then as the skill level sort of decreases and it takes a little bit more time as more players are, they're learning the game or they're getting better at the game, they're going to fill out these other areas a little bit slower and a little bit slower and a little bit slower till eventually it starts to fill out, right? Till eventually it starts to even out a little bit more. Uh, and so what a lot of times I think that you're seeing is just the fact that yeah, you're used to playing against a certain caliber of people at the start of the season because those teammates know what they're doing. And the reason why they know what they're doing is because those are the future Celestial, Eternity, and One Above All players, or the future like early GM players that are like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing, so I'm going to go through there, right? And what you're seeing is not a rank inflation, but merely a rank settling. This is where, over time, this is where the players were always supposed to be, right? Uh, this is, to me, is not like oh my God, there's like some huge problem here. It's just that it's clear that because of the fact that their curve doesn't go like this, that this system just works differently than what we're used to. And so the problem is people's perception of how they think it's supposed to work and versus how it's working is not lining up correctly, right? So it can't figure out because of the fact that it starts at the bottom, it can't figure out where everyone is supposed to be until there's more data. And the more points could be getting more points for a win versus a loss could be a variety of different reasons in my mind that I could theorize. It's expected due to win streaks. It could be the fact that you are the lowest ranked player on the team that won. It could be that you're the lowest ranked player on the team that lost. And for people saying like, oh, well, why does this person have a 48% win rate in the rank that I'm at? Boosting, grouping with someone. If you group with someone who's, 3 divisions higher and you win a game, the person who's 3 divisions higher gets less for the win and more for the losses. And the person who's lower gets more for the wins and less for the losses. So to me, when I see like, oh, well, this person's boosted with like a 48.76% win rate, like why are they in this game? Boosting. That to me seems like an easier explanation than inflation. It seems more like boosting, right? Which is not new to PvP shooters. Like this has always happened. That's always going to happen. Something I wanted to include was my match history from yesterday and doing sort of like a more in-depth deep dive into it. Uh, Generally speaking, the wins and losses kind of make sense. I was playing where each game was either like a plus or minus 2021, give or take 1 to 3 numbers here and there. But because of the fact that I was in a group with other players, I was in a group where we originally started with a Grandmaster 1 and a Grandmaster me at Grandmaster 2 and another person at Grandmaster 3. We had varying skill levels, which means we're going up against people who are varying skill levels. And in the games where I was Grandmaster 2, but I got around the same points for per win as I would a loss, was they were games where I was pretty equal in strength to the average of the enemy team. The games where I scored a little bit more, I was generally up against players who were higher ranked than me or more expected to win. And there's other games like these ones down here where the loss of the points is less. I was going up against players who were better. And this one here, I remember specifically, we were going up against a 4 stack that had like a 96% win rate or something crazy. So even though we were the same rank, we were not exactly the same expectation of winning. And then when I did an even deeper dive and compared not just me at Grandmaster 2, but I compared the win-loss points of the people at Grandmaster 1 versus the people on the enemy team with Grandmaster 1, those fell more in line with one another of someone either getting plus 21 or minus 21 or plus 22 or minus 22. Like everything sort of like when you compared more evenly, like the person on the team who had a similar rank on the enemy team, it's pretty close in range. And it's not enough for me to believe that it's inflation. It's not enough for me to believe that there's some tinfoil hat conspiracy theory out there. The more I look into things, from the websites, and I can see other people's profiles, it seems like there is, at least at my rank and what I'm used to playing at, there's features in place that's not just taken into account like whether or not you win or lost, but also your sort of comparison to the enemy team and your own team. So yeah, I just want to include that in there as well because the more I look into the individual points and how much everyone's getting, it seems to line up with what my beliefs are and how the system works. But yeah, the other theory I have, which this one I have no evidence for, it's more so just like an idea. Wins could count for more the earlier on in the season that you play. And the reason why that might be is to help, incentivize you to fill up the ranks, the higher ranks faster, right? The downside of that is you're going up against the players who are naturally better at the game, and they're going to rise to those ranks quicker. So it's going to be tougher matches earlier on. Uh, but this also helps because of the fact that there could be incentive in terms of like incentivizing you to rank up early, but it also could mean that the games towards the end of the season, as it starts to level out a bit more and people start to really land where they're supposed to land, the people who are the low elo players trying to get that gold skin might have an easier time towards the end of the season versus at the start in order to secure those last few points to get through and get the skin or get their goal, right? But ultimately, I think what's happening here is just the fact that you can't shove all of these players, or you can't shove literally everybody pushed back into this area, changing the graph from being like this to suddenly being like this, and not expecting a huge dramatic change of how the ranks feel, towards the end of the season. And actually, one of the things I want to show you is I took screenshots of the promotions I got because I thought it was interesting, right? You know, uh, start of the season, the games that felt like the hardest at times were some of the earliest on, right? I got Platinum 3, 97.41% of players. Not bad. I promoted to Plat 1, 97.4. That's interesting. 0.01 for 2 ranks, right? That you wouldn't expect that, right? Diamond 2, 98.3%. Diamond 3, yeah, Diamond 3, 98.32%. Diamond 2, 99.2% at the time. Grandmaster 3, now I'm going down. Even though I'm ranking up, I'm going down in rank, right? Uh, this is what I mean. And this, like, people are looking at the rank and they're like, well, I'm looking at the rank and it's not reflecting what I'm feeling. This reflects more so what you might be feeling, right? The players that you were playing with early on in the season, uh, were different than who you were playing towards the end of the season. As people start to win more games and as it starts to level out a bit more and become a little bit more where it should be, this percentage here is included, I believe, to try and inform you as to where you actually stand at that current place in time. Because to me, ultimately, this is sort of the number that I keep trying to make go up. I'm not looking just at the rank. I'm looking at this percentage here. The percentage is included for a reason. They wouldn't not show it there, but people are not paying attention to this part for some reason. Like I don't really, you know, stop paying attention to the rank. Start paying attention. If you want something to shoot for higher percentage. Like that's still a goal. Uh, so yeah, there's two bits of information on the rank promotion page, and I feel like people are only looking at the one. So because of the way that Marvel Rivals does their rank system, you can't just bounce around between the different ranks throughout the season and expect it to always feel the same. You need to understand that it just doesn't quite feel the same as it used to. And what you're mad at is that, Grandmaster players at the start of the season didn't feel like the Grandmaster ones at the end of the season. Well, that's because the Grandmaster players that you played with then are now Celestial, right? So, if you could play against the Diamond players that you were playing with in the past, you can play against the Grandmaster players that are, there at the end of the season. You can still grind. Like, you can still get a higher rank. And it might be easier for you to get that higher rank towards the end of the season. Uh, it might be frustrating because of the fact that you expect a certain caliber of person, but that expectation and that perception is what's holding you back, not the system in place, I believe. I think ultimately this sort of distracts from the whole thing we're supposed to be looking at anyway, which is just the whole point of the game is to just try and learn, improve, and do better. Be a more of a positive influence on your team and get secure more wins over time, uh, than it is any singular game or any particular rank. What I am seeing is that a lot of people have certain expectations of what they expect uh, Grandmaster to be in a game, right? Other games have Grandmasters. Overwatch had Grandmaster, and Grandmaster feels more like Diamond to Overwatch players year- than probably Grandmaster. And people have a certain expectation of being like, well, Grandmaster, it just doesn't feel like it's as good anymore. It feels like it's been watered down. And it's like, I don't think it's been watered down. It's just your perception and what you expect Grandmaster to be isn't the same. And if you got to Grandmaster and now you're upset because now it doesn't weigh as much as it did at the start of the season, I don't think that you're upset at necessarily the ranking system as it is like you're upset that you can't throw the weight around of saying you're GM anymore, right? That to me sounds more likely than being mad at the system. Because to me, I don't feel any difference. Like when I played at the start of the season, it was tough and there was like coin tossy matches because of the fact that, I there's certain players that are down there that shouldn't be down there that definitely heavily skew how games feel early on. Right? It felt coin tossy sometimes at the beginning as well. Like there's just definitely just games that are coin tossy. Um, but to me personally, I'm still playing up against players where at the end of the season, like yes, it feels differently, but I'm still playing and beating these people and practicing and getting better. And from my experience personally, the 1 to 2 point difference that I've seen in terms of like the wins and losses could be easily attributed to people having win streaks, people having me being the lowest ranked member on the team. Like to me, how it feels playing the game, you know, it feels pretty close to the same. Like I have those games where people are just really bad, and I have games where people are just really good. I have games that are pretty fair, but I still just keep playing anyway, right? Like the point is that it's still fun to play. It's still fun to play with my friends, and I'm still going to group up, and I'm still going to do it regardless. Like whether or not the rank system works perfectly doesn't matter to me. And there is no perfect rank system, right? This is just like this is their first test. This is their first iteration. They had a season 0. There wasn't a whole lot of time to get a lot of data. There's a season and a half, and or a first half of first season, and that wasn't a lot of time to get a lot of data. And now they're getting even more data. And ultimately, I think what's happening here is just a player perception thing versus a like necessarily a ranked problem. Like we could rework the ranking system and have placement matches so it matches more in line with what people's perceptions are. That might help fix things. But if you are upset that, currently you're like, well, I don't like the players on my team. Well, the same players that are on your team are also on the enemy team. So you still just have to play regardless and try and just focus on what you can do to improve. Um, but yeah, and also I've seen people say like, well, the Overwatch players that I used to know in the past that were like plat or diamond are like grandmaster now. So it doesn't make sense as to why, those people who I thought were bad at Overwatch are suddenly good at Marvel Rivals. And to that, I would say that there's a lot of things that you learn in Overwatch from hero-based shooters that directly translates over. And a lot of people in Marvel Rivals come from other games other than Overwatch. It's not just Overwatch. There's people from Call of Duty, there's people from Valorant, there's people from all sorts of different games, right? But the people in Overwatch, even the diamond players and the plat players, have a certain at least understanding of how hero-based shooters work that would give them an advantage. And at the same time, Marvel Rivals relies less on aim and more about how you use your abilities and when you time them. than strictly mechanical skill alone. So people coming from those other games like Call of Duty or Valorant, where your aim is, I think, a little bit more, uh, highly prioritized as a skill, doesn't matter nearly as much as knowing when to alt, when to engage, when to disengage. So to me, it wouldn't shock me that people who were, decent at Overwatch are suddenly a lot better at Marvel Rivals than a lot of the other players that might be playing. I think we're not giving enough credit to the people who, played Overwatch for years, right? Um, but yeah, I think there's a lot of explanations, a lot of other easier explanations to explain, like, well, why is this person on my team playing so poorly? Like, I think it's more likely that they are high, they're tilted, they're boosted. Um, there's a lot of explanations to me that make a lot more sense than some tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. And like, I understand too, like, there's the whole NetEase thing of just like, oh, well, people created this thing and they're like, oh, maybe this would be, we have a patent for this thing. It's just because there's a patent on it doesn't necessarily mean that we know that it's implemented. So I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of just assuming information that we don't know. I don't like doing that because it's never assume what you don't know. Just start there for a lesson in life. Um, and just focus on the game as is. Because to me personally, from a game dev standpoint, I think that there are other explanations as to why this is, and it all starts with the fact that everyone gets pushed down to the bottom of every season. Another thing I wanted to include that I forgot to mention was that I don't want people to feel like their rank ups or their accomplishments are any less valid than they were at the start of the season. Like, to rank up in this game, you still have to go up against other players, and you still have to prove that you are a more positive impact than a negative one. And just because of the fact that Marvels makes players start from the bottom and work their way up instead of the usual placement matches where the bell curve happens more from the middle and then evens out, just because of the fact we don't know naturally where player distribution is going to lie at the end when everyone is, done duking it out and when you actually start to see the ranks truly start to settle where they ultimately should be. It doesn't change the fact that at the end of the day, your goal is to learn, improve, and do better, right? As you rank up, you're still going to find better and better players, and you need to make fewer and fewer mistakes, and that's ultimately your goal is to just learn and improve. The rank is merely a reflection of that progress. It's trying to give you a reflection. And what people are upset by is the fact that their perception of the rank changes over time as more people start to fill up those certain ranks. Um, and whether Grandmaster is the top 2% of players or whether it's the top 8% of players, ultimately, I don't think matters is that important that much. If you, that's the reason why they give you a percentage in the first place. If you want something to compare it to, look at the percentage. If you want a goal, get aim to see a being part of the higher percentile. Like, if ranking up is truly your goal, then let that be your goal. Don't just focus on the rank itself. But I really don't think it's as big of an issue as people make it out to be. There are still players who consistently climb to one above all, who are extremely good at the game. Um, and even when they play, they don't have a perfect 100% win rate. You are going to have games that are for sure just losses, right? Some games that you just can't win, but that doesn't change the fact that you're still trying to do your best. You're still trying to win. And how you're going to end up after one individual game is not what matters. It's how and where you end up after 100 games or 200 games. Um, so yeah, don't let this distract you from what you ultimately need to be focusing on, which is just learning, improving, and doing better. And if you can set your goals of trying to be consistent enough that you're climbing and you get to a new high rank, a new peak, or a new higher percentile, then great. Let that still take pride in that because it still takes effort, it still takes work. But yeah, ultimately at the end of the day, this is just a video game, and this rank doesn't matter, and you're all going to forget about it in 10 years, and you're going to be complaining about the next game. So don't worry about it too much. The end of the day, like I said, the goal is to learn, improve, and do better and carry harder. Focus on that and not your teammates and not whether or not the rank system is perfect. Um, because you can always keep learning, you can always keep improving, you can always carry harder. Uh, yeah, that's all I got to say on that part. And the other thing I'm going to say is like people believe what they want to believe, right? I don't. It's not a gamer thing. It's a human thing. And when I was younger, when we played Pokemon Red and Blue, uh, there was the mythical Pokemon Mew, and you learned through, you learned you could get it through a Game Shark, but you couldn't get it any other means. But we had urban myths that were like, oh, if you go to like Viridian City or whatever it was, and like go to this bush and go 10 steps over and 4 steps up and go back and forth, you'll eventually bump into a Mew or something. Like we had all these urban myths of like how you could catch this Pokemon in the game, and none of them were ever true, right? But they still persisted. Everyone still tried them. We still believed them anyway, and we still tried to make it happen. And none of them worked. Um, you know, it, people believe what they want to believe, right? People are going to find whatever information they can to validate how they're feeling and just choose to believe it. Uh, and to me, this is no different. Like we're looking at information of a system that they created and they're testing out, and now people are, you know, they're so upset because of the fact that like they feel like their rank doesn't mean as much anymore. But it's like just rank up some more, like play the game, learn, get better. Like there are still people who are consistently climbing to one above all. So it's not impossible. Teams are not holding you back. You can still improve and still get better. You can still play the game. Your rank doesn't matter that freaking much. Like just focus on trying to get better, trying to improve. Focus on learning, having fun, playing the heroes that you want to play. Because the more you get obsessed with this idea of just like, well, I need to have this certain rank, it's just like it doesn't matter. Like if you want to shoot for something, shoot for that higher percentage, right? Don't focus on the rank. Take a screenshot of the percentage that you got and show like, okay, this is the percentage that I want to get. I want to get into the top 99% of players at least once, right? Shoot for that. Make that your goal. Don't make the goal to rank then, because there's a reason why they include that percentage in there. But the only way to really know where you belong anywhere in this graph is to play as many games as possible from the start of the season to the end of the season. So that way the system has more data to figure out where you belong. Uh, and, you know, ultimately, like that's the only way to get an accurate amount of assessment as to like, you know, where you're supposed to end up, right? Because when you take all of the players, once again, when you take all of the players and you shove them back down into these ranks, you're going to get skewed results and skewed perception of what you think the ranks are supposed to be like. Um, as you progress up, because if you are used to uh if you are used to platinum and diamond being more difficult, that's because these players were forced back there with you. And now that they've long since moved on, now you're upset at the fact that where you're averaging out might be exactly where you're supposed to be. I know that's like a tough pill to swallow, but like all the players who are good left. They moved on. That's why, like, where did all the players who knew what they were doing and knew how to play the game? Where'd they go? They're higher in rank. Simple as that. Like, so and in all my games, I can't. There's so many different factors that could show like different things. Like, I don't know much about the Chrono Shield. I've never seen it on my own accounts before. Like, all of my games, I get about 20 or 21 to 22 for a win or a loss, either way. Like, and that's me and GM and Celestial. Like, that's generally where all of my points are. So to me, I don't see any difference. And when I log on, I'm not automatically assumed that my first few wins of the day or first few games of the day are going to be wins. And yesterday, it definitely wasn't. So I see people theorizing stuff, but saying how like, oh, well, you get more for wins for losses. Like, I don't. And saying you get like better games when you start off the day, and you haven't played in a while, like that didn't happen to me. It's like I have no idea what people are talking about, but just like how people believed that you could unlock Mew, through different means back in the day, I believe it's the same thing. People are believing what they want to believe, and ultimately, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like, if you want to be on teams with better players, rank up and you'll find them. I think that that's ultimately all you need to focus on is just, improve, get better, and uh, play the game because it's fun to play. But if you're playing the game strictly because of the rank, then I have questions as to like why, why does that matter? Because like, yeah, Grandmaster in this game doesn't mean the same as it did in Overwatch, but, like, I'm not playing because of the fact that I wanna tell people I'm GM. I'm playing because of the fact that I want to personally do better. I wanna personally improve. I wanna personally try and find ways to, uh, carry myself even more in these games. And, and most of all, just play with my friends. Like, I have fun playing with my friends. So, yeah, I think what we're seeing is not rank inflation. I think what we're seeing is rank settling. And after people have enough games under their belt, we're seeing how the natural distribution of games of where people are supposed to fall because of the fact that um, you know, starting games like this is inaccurate. Like if it, and because of the fact that Marvel Rivals doesn't have placement matches, it's going to heavily skew how this game feels versus how other games feel. Um, but yeah, that's the reason why like they include the percentage for a reason. If you want something to chase, chase the percentage. But otherwise, like, yeah, I don't know. I think there's just a lot of other explanations. I don't think there's any sort of tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. I just think that they tried a new system to see how it would work, and now because of the fact that it's not lining up with players' expectations, they want to make excuses as to why they're not playing. But at the end of the day, your teams aren't holding you back. Like uh, people are still climbing to one above all, and you can too. It's just a matter you just got to focus on your own play. Got to improve. Got to get better. That's that. Anyway, those are my thoughts on inflation and everything else. Yeah, I don't think it's as big a deal as people are making it out to be. But yeah, I don't know. I just haven't quite seen personally or felt the things that other people are talking about, so I have a hard time uh believing it. But from a game dev standpoint and seeing how their system was laid out and how it was started from the beginning, I don't know. It just kind of all makes sense to me. But I don't know. Maybe I changed some minds today. Maybe I didn't. But that's all I got.